Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to our second installment of You Can Grow. So today our topic is food and lodging. What that means is we're going to look at some food for your plants, but we're also going to take those seedlings that you started to grow last time, and we're going to figure out where we're going to be putting those as they start to grow and look for some more space to hang out. So again, just a reminder, if you're following this, you've probably been on our website, but if not, schmidtgreenhouses.com is a good opportunity for you to go and check out what's going on at the greenhouses, especially this time of the year. We have an Ask the Expert forum if you have questions you need to get answered, and you're going to find a whole bunch of other resources to help you get through the spring. Alright, so as we move into today, basically we're going to not talk about moving things to their final destination. We're going to be talking about taking those seedlings and moving them into the next apartment, if you will. We're not going to your final home, we're just going to an in-between home, if you will. For some things, we may be moving from a seedling straight into the garden, but that's not really what we're talking about today. Okay, so Holly's going to show you just a few things that you might want to keep in mind as we take a look at starting to transplant.
So we just went around the greenhouse a little bit this morning and found some plugs that we thought we could use as demos for what you might have already growing at your house if you're growing in your windows or in a greenhouse. This is I'll get this one actually. This is a lettuce plug. So this is quite thickly seeded. This is actually a lettuce mix. And so there's several different varieties in that one cell. And so if you've seeded lettuce, usually you'll just spread it out in your tray and it's going to come up a little bit too thick. So we wanted to just show you how to divide that cell out. This one again is just too thick for us to even plant as a mixed plug. So what you're going to do with this, if it was in your tray already, you could use a little tool of some sort to pluck the little cells out. So if this was already here and we wanted to take it out, just get some little tools to help you dig out so you're not just wrenching on the plant itself. They don't like to be grabbed and pulled. So if you have a little, this is actually a orange peel little tool, and we've used these for years and years in the greenhouse, so this one's seen better days, but that's very effective for just getting little things out of small containers. And then what you want to do, I messed with that one a little bit already this morning, but we're just going to separate the green, the foliage, and find the base of the plant. It's a little fiddlier than I thought it might be. And then just start to get right down to the base and give it a little tug and pull it apart. So you can see that I'm being very gentle with the roots, but separating them nonetheless. And so then we've got several little pieces and we can just keep going. Okay, so this guy might not survive. We'll just put him aside. And that's okay because it's thick anyway, so we're just trying to separate it out. So I'm going to do that once more with this. And again, just very gently pull and separate the roots. All right?
You can see there's lots of good root there, so this has been a really good successful seeding. It's a good time just to remind you again of when we should be doing this. Last time we talked about when do you start to transplant, or when do you start to fertilize is actually the question we brought. And this shouldn't be happening until at least you have a couple pairs of true leaves. Okay, so remember the first pair came out as cotyledons, those little things that look like leaves but not. So you should have at least a couple more pairs of true leaves. Then you're going to be able to check and see what kind of root there is. Okay, so if you see these, there's lots of root on these. They're definitely ready to be transplanted up into something bigger and get access to more soil and some more food. Right,
so I'm just going to make a little divot in there, tuck it in, and you want to make sure that there's not a lot of air around your roots, but you don't want it so compacted that it isn't going to absorb water nicely either. So.
And you can see we're going into a slightly different mix compared to what we talked about last time in the seeding mix. Okay, so this is a growing mix. It has a bit of perlite and vermiculite in it. That's going to allow air to get around to the roots. Like Holly said, if you pack it too tight, then you're not going to get air, you're not going to get moisture that's going to be able to move to those roots. So It's a good balance.
So the other thing I just wanted to show you this morning as well, I guess, sorry, I'll go back a little bit. These ones were fine. The lettuce is fine to pull apart the roots and things because they're a fairly hardy plant and they don't mind having their roots disturbed. Other plants, I brought this little cucumber plant in, they do not like their roots disturbed. So a lot of times you would plant a cucumber in a peat pot where you can just take the whole pot and set it in the ground or in your next sized up container. We don't grow in peat pots here, we grow in plastic. And so if you're purchasing from us, of course, this is the container that you would get for all of your cucumbers. And the reason that it's still okay to do that is because it's quite a flexible pot and you don't have to do a lot of disturbing to get this out of the pot. If you just do a little squeeze on the bottom, it will usually come loose very nicely and you can just very gently edge that out of the container. And there you can see all these beautiful, nice white roots just coming through. And that's a perfect time to actually transplant that. So these are going into our baskets. And this one has 2 plants in there for cross-pollination, but you definitely do not want to separate these. So when you take this home and put this in your garden, you plant it just like it is. Just very gently ease it out and plant the whole cell just as it is. Don't disturb the roots, just keep it nice and happy.
Yeah, so that can be planted in a bigger pot. It could be planted into a hanging basket, depending on the type of the variety of the cucumber. Okay, but again, we don't want to disturb it, but planting it up in a bigger pot will allow it to then start to grow and become a more mature plant. All right.
So I've also got tomatoes here. So this is closer to the size that we showed you a week ago. This one has its, what do you call these little non-true leaves? Yep. And then it does have some true leaves as well, and you can see the root is quite nice. It's not really root bound yet, but it's still ready to be transplanted. And tomatoes are a fascinating plant because they actually grow roots up the stem. And so if this were taller, some of ours got a little stretchy and some of them were this tall coming out of this tiny little plug. And what you can do with that is actually plant that nice and deep. So where I was just tucking the roots in here on the lettuce, the tomato, you can actually make a half decent sized hole, and if you need to, you can plant it really deep right down in and just bury that up. And what that will do for you, it will root up the stem and it will also produce a stockier, hardier, stronger stem. So you're going to have a much more sturdy plant in the end to hold the weight of your fruit. So I've also got these larger tomatoes, and there's some really nice roots. Oh, it's actually growing into the next cell. So there's some beautiful, healthy roots. They came out of the pack really nicely. Again, you can just give the bottom of the plastic a little squeeze, let it come out. And these ones, because they're quite nicely root bound, you can actually open up those roots. And tomatoes are happy to have that done because, again, they're strong rooting. You can, I don't know whether you can see this on a video or not, but you can see all this little furry stem. All of those are going to become roots if they're down in the soil. So I did bring some other pots out. And so this one, you can remove these bottom leaves very gently so that you're not burying those. Take those off. And then even up to this one, you can remove that leaf. And then you can plant this right up to that next leaf. And it's going to be so much happier. The other thing I should...
tendency is a lot of people just want to go there, right? They see that and they think, right. And for a lot of plants, that's the case. Yeah, go to the level of the soil that's there. But for tomatoes, that's not the case at all. So what are some other stem rooters, Holly? You mentioned, are there some others that like to be planted deep?
Vegetable-wise, I'm not actually sure about other vegetable stem rooters, but tomatoes are the big one. Some of the flowering annuals, you can do the same thing with a marigold. You can do the same thing with cosmos. So there's definitely anything that looks a little bit furry. They aren't all going to be stem rooters, but anything that's a little bit furry looking tends to be a stem rooter. So yeah, experiment a little bit. You may have some wins, you may have some losses, but that's part of gardening as well. So the other thing I did want to show you just with this little guy, I'll just give him a little tug and show you what you can do with this. If you've grown your own tomatoes from seed, and they're getting tall and stretchy because they're lacking in light or they're just ready to transplant and you didn't have time to get to them yet, You can actually take this stem, being quite pliable, and you can wrap it deep and put it down upside down. As long as you don't break that stem, of course. If you break the stem, you're going to lose your tomato. But you can bury it nice and deep that way. So if your pot is not deep enough, and this one actually isn't, I can't get to the bottom of this pot, but I could actually do this, plant that just like that, and it's going to be a happy tomato.
So the more roots, obviously, the happier the plant will be. It's going to be able to get more water, more food. So for tomatoes, plant them deep. What you really don't want is you don't want a lot of leaves sitting on the soil. That's just an opportunity for disease and bacteria to build up. So try to pull off the bottom branches so that it's standing up above the soil. Okay, what do we got here?
This is my herb garden. So lots of people want to grow their own herbs, and it's a brilliant way to add excellent flavor to many, many different dishes. Yeah, just get some great cookbooks and do some experimenting, and it just adds phenomenal flavor, especially to a salad. You can add any kind of green to a salad, and it just makes it burst with flavor. What I've actually got here is parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. These all, I was actually just going to do the parsley, sage, and rosemary because I didn't think I could fit it all in this pot, but then I looked at the time and I wanted the trailing habit of this, because this is going to be not only something that you can eat from, but something that is decorative and can be very attractive on your back deck or in your window. I'm going to plant this for outdoors, which of course has to wait some time yet before you can take it out there and leave it overnight anyway, just in our area of the country. So I'm going to take my tallest plant, and this is quite aggressive. The Italian parsley is fairly aggressive, which is great because you can use it in just about everything. So when we pull this plant out, and I don't mean pull, don't do that, just loosen the edges of the pot and then actually tip it right upside down, and if it's loose enough, it should fall out. And again, these are really healthy looking, nice white roots. You want a nice white root that's coming right to the bottom of the pot. And so then to transplant this one, I'm actually also going to pull open the roots a little bit. I was hoping for something that was a little more root bound, but it's a little bit early in the season. So, but if this was really thick with root right through to the bottom and it was harder to get out of the pot, you can actually take like a piece of dowel or something like that and poke up through the holes in the bottom of the pot to loosen it a little bit more. But then what I want to do actually is sort of tear it open just a little bit, not a lot, because you don't really want to wreck the roots. You just want to encourage them to go out into that next pot size. And then I'm just going to dig a nice hole about the same size as what I've got in the pot. Just pull it aside, set it down in, and put it to bed. Just tuck it in.
Yeah, so stimulating those roots by breaking them up a little bit actually helps to encourage the growth. Kind of like muscle development. When you stimulate your muscles, it causes them to grow. And so don't be afraid just to break up, especially around the bottoms of the pots, where you see a lot of these. You want to show that? You see a lot of these white areas where they're really starting to get thick, and you see basically just root. Certainly feel free to break those up, and that's going to stimulate some really good root growth in the next little while.
Often if it's too root bound and you don't separate the roots a little bit, you know, a week or two later, you can come back and your plant hasn't really grown an awful lot. And if you were to, heaven forbid, spill your pot by, you know, an animal knocking it over or something like that, you might even find that it's still just sitting right in that 4-inch pot size or whatever pot you took it out of. And it's really just not doing anything. So you just want to give it a little bit more of a nudge and encourage it to grow along a little bit faster. I'll just keep planting. You can keep talking.
All right. So yeah, so certainly you can plant into a container. So if you're inside the house and you want to just keep things inside, maybe you have a really sunny window or solarium, doing this kind of thing works great. You can then take it out during the day, put it on the deck, bring it back in. You know, this time of the year, we're basically around the 1st of May. We don't know what the night temperatures are going to be. They're going to change dramatically from day to day, week to week. Right? So we're going to assume we're going to be getting frost. Could be for the next month or 6 weeks. Okay, so if you're growing inside, containers are a great way to be able to make things portable, get them outside, get some good sun, get some fresh air, and also helps them to dry out a little more easily. So certainly consider doing a number of things that way in an indoor container. Some of you may want to start to try to do some things out in whether it's a cold frame or a cloche, which could be just like a plastic cover. Some of you may do tunnel type of gardens, which are basically like mini greenhouses. Really what they're doing is they're holding in the temperature overnight. Okay? And that's great, especially if we're getting down to around freezing but not getting significantly below. What it does help to do is warm up the ground. Okay? But we still have cold night temperatures. The days are good. So growing outside and starting in a greenhouse, if you have a greenhouse, if you're fortunate enough to have your own greenhouse, that's great. But again, you always have to think about what do I have for supplementary heat, or what happens when I get a -5-degree night. Okay, so certainly consider that as an option, but if you're really not comfortable with that, or you don't have the equipment or the tools to do that, maybe consider something like an indoor container garden for now. Alright, so one thing about growing outside, we talked about those temperature fluctuations. One big problem with temperature fluctuations, we have a really hot day, let's say, it's sunny and warm, and then it goes down, because it's so clear, it drops down to close to zero. Okay, those warm days, cold nights, cause a lot of stretching in your plants. And so what you end up with, these tall, lanky, not terribly strong plants that are going to struggle to be a good plant in the end. For example, tomatoes, they're not going to be a strong stalk, they may break, you're going to have a hard time supporting the fruit. Okay, so think about trying to maintain as even a temperature as you can. Obviously it's going to fluctuate up and down, but the less that it fluctuates, the better that's going to be from your plants. Alright, I think that's about it for lodging. Okay, so we got our plants moved into their nice new apartment. Again, it's not necessarily their final home, it's not their dream home, but it's a good start. Okay. And we may want to transplant more than once, more than twice. It depends again on how early you start and all the conditions that we've been talking about so far. Alright, so food. Plants do need food, and as we said, after a couple true leaves, they need to be fed. Right? And they don't really like steak and potatoes. They don't really like most of the stuff that we like. They have a very simple menu for the most part. And they have really 3 things. I'm a steak and potatoes guy. Ollie, what are you?
Seafood.
Seafood? Yes. Thankfully she's seafood, because I like seafood too. But plants have 3 staples: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash. And so when you're asking or looking for fertilizers, when you see a fertilizer, they have 3 numbers on them. Okay, and those 3 numbers correspond to those 3 macronutrients, or those 3 big staple food items. Okay, I'm going to quickly just talk about what all 3 of those are, and then I'm going to talk about a few other extra fertilizer or soil amendments. So, on that label, 3 numbers, the first one represents nitrogen. Okay, so nitrogen is the green growth part of the fertilizer. Okay, so if you want grass and you go to your local hardware store, or you come into the greenhouse and you're looking for some lawn fertilizer, the first number, nitrogen, is going to be high, because you want a lot of green color in your lawn. You're not worried about anything else, you just want to get that thing nice and green so that you can win the prize for the best lawn in the block. Alright, so that's the first number. So if you're growing things like corn, you want lots of nitrogen in it. You want to get that stalk growing up, you want to get that big plant growing. If you're growing carrots, that's maybe not the best thing to have a whole lot of. Okay? You want to grow a green top, but you don't want to have all green tops and not much carrot below the ground. Okay, so that's our nitrogen. The second one is phosphorus. So phosphorus is really for root growth. Okay, and so one of the natural fertilizers that's out there is called bone meal. Bone meal in this case is 410-0. All right. Yeah, so if you're wondering what happened there, we had a power shortage, so we have a little glitch in our perfect webinar. Oh well. Okay, so carrying on, I was talking about bone meal. So bone meal in this formulation is 410. The middle number is basically for root growth. Okay, so bones are a real big source of phosphorus. So this bone meal is just a ground up bones, and so it's a good source of that root growth. So I basically use this anytime I'm planting any annuals, perennials, trees, shrubs. It's all natural, so it's really safe to use. It's not going to burn the roots around anything that you're doing. And you can just take a handful, sprinkle it around, mix it into the bed. Okay, so good all-purpose fertilizer for root development. The third number on there is, you have nitrogen, we said. Second one is phosphorus. Third one is potash. Okay, so potash is something that's fairly important for fruits and vegetables. Okay, so really if you're looking to create a really good garden that has, let's say, tomatoes. Okay? So tomatoes, you want to have a fair bit of green because you want to have a healthy plant, but you also want good fruit production. So you want phosphorus for a good root, and also the potash is what you're really looking for that fruit development or that vegetable development. Okay, so here's get the English side. Tomato and vegetable is 4, 12, 10. Okay, so it's got a decent amount of nitrogen for the plant to grow, but it's got 12 and 10. Those last two are great for vegetables. Okay, so 4, 12, 10, we've sold like a 6, 12, 12 is a common tomato fertilizer. Okay, so those are your three macronutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash. And they're standard. Doesn't matter what kind of fertilizer you're buying, they're going to have those three numbers. There are also other things that you need to think about, and one of the things is your soil pH. Okay, and if you have a soil tester or soil test kit, again, early on, we talked about this in the first one, it's not a huge deal. Most, especially this type of peat-based medium, they have a pretty good pH, around somewhere between 6 and 7. Okay, as things grow and as you transplant them up and as they've been sitting in a pot a little longer, the pH can start to change. Okay, and the only problem with that is as we get pH moving away from 6 to 7, the nutrients aren't necessarily available to our plants. Okay, so we can be putting lots of nice fertilizer on here, but some of those nutrients, or actually the micronutrients, we'll talk about that in a second, aren't going to be able to get into the plant. They're just going to leach through the soil, and one of the most common things that happens, and especially around here, our water is fairly basic, so it tends to raise the pH. And as it raises the pH, iron, which is a big thing for us as well as plants, becomes pretty much unavailable once we get to 7.5 or 8 for our pH. And so what happens to your plant is it starts to turn yellow. We get yellowing happening, and we have just a plant that looks very anemic and very weak. Okay, so that's, even though we're pouring all sorts of fertilizer on there, it can't access it. So pH can be an important thing when we're talking about vegetables. Again, when we get too low, if we get too acid in our soil, maybe we're putting lots of whatever we want to put on there to acidify the soil. Calcium and magnesium, we know for ourselves that's good for bone development and whatnot. Same for plants. They like calcium and magnesium as those micronutrients. And as it gets more acid, those are harder and harder to absorb. So just try to think about keeping that pH somewhere in the middle. And if you don't really know, come on in and grab a test kit, or see what you can do to find out a pH. All right, so just back in terms of some fertilizers. Where are we here? Oh, the other one I forgot to mention, there's another natural product called blood meal. So we had bone meal, which is the phosphorus. Okay, so that's for the root growth. Blood meal is basically pure nitrogen. Okay, so if you're looking for a natural source of nitrogen, then the blood meal is a great option as well. Okay. There's a number of other different types. This is just a kind of a ubiquitous Miracle-Gro product. So this has 15, 30, 15. Okay, so lots of root growth, which makes for really good flowering plants, gets a good healthy plant, but lots of nitrogen and lots of potash for those flower development as well. Okay. Now, these are liquid fertilizers. They're basically a powder that you mix with water and you put them on, you water them in as you're watering your plants. Okay? Great option for early on. Basically you're getting the fertilizer there. They're nice and safe to use. They're not going to burn your roots as well. Okay? And it's nice and convenient because you're fertilizing and watering at the same time. The only drawback to liquid-based fertilizers, or these soluble-based fertilizers, is if it's really wet and cool and you're not able to water an awful lot, it can be a problem to get enough fertilizer into your plants. Okay, so just something to think about. So that's the soluble.
And just follow the instructions for the mixing.
Yeah, exactly. Most of them are like a teaspoon to a gallon of water, or 4 liters.
But don't take our word for it. Read the container.
Absolutely. Okay. So the other types, like this one that I showed you, is a powder. Okay. And some other ones are granules. You know, this is a slow release fertilizer. It's really made for hanging baskets, but we use it in quite a few things. What do we put this in?
We put that on all of our hanging baskets, all of our planters, all of our tomato tubs. Yeah,
it's a good all-purpose fertilizer. It's a slow release, so it breaks down over a period of a couple to 3 months. Right? So it gives a slow, steady feed rather than the sock in the face like you get with this.
One of the things I would say about that, though, is it does say that it's good over 3 months. We usually reduce that to about a month, but even still, you're gaining a whole 30 days of not having to think about fertilizer. So as long as you remember when you put it on, then just give it another shot 30 days later, and you're good to go.
So the nice thing about the granular fertilizer, it's steadily breaking down, even if you're not watering. So if you have wet soil and you can't water it, this is feeding your plants, nice and slow and steady. For most plants, though, it's not enough. Okay, so as you've got this in there, you're going to probably use a soluble every time you water as well. Especially for things like petunias, some of the heavy feeders that are the flowering petunias in big baskets that you want a good show. Right? So you'd be using these in conjunction with each other. All right, just a couple other things. We talked about some pH. And this isn't really relevant to this section on transplanting and fertilizers, but as you later on get into the garden and you have some problems with your pH, there are a couple of products that you can use to move it up and down the scale. Okay, so we have aluminum sulfate. So a lot of people use this, for example, for their Colorado blue spruce or their hydrangeas to get a good bluish color. Okay, and so what it does is it helps to reduce the pH or make it more acid. Over here we have dolomitic lime, okay, and dolomitic lime is a way to bring the pH up. So if you have a really acid soil, putting some lime in there will help to increase that pH and move it up into a zone that's maybe more appropriate. Okay, so just a couple extra ones to think on, mainly later on once things are out and you're getting some significant change in pH. And then the last thing I'll just mention is there are some things like Gaia has a really nice set of products out there. This is a soluble seaweed that we've been growing or selling for a number of years, and it seems to be a really popular product in the store lately. So if you're looking for something different, the seaweed extract is a great option as well. And so you can just put that either in conjunction with the other ones. Again, probably for granular one, and something like this is a great option. All right, so we've covered food, we've covered lodging. I think we're good for another week.
I think so.
So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. And in the meantime, good luck with your gardening. If you have questions, come on our website, click on the Ask the Expert, and we hope you have a successful spring, because we know you can grow. All right, take care.
Bye-bye.